With over 70 hours in Subnautica 2 and hundreds of hours in the first game, there's a lot of things I love about Subnautica 2, but there's also a lot of things I think don't currently live up to the first game, which of course is fine since it's the very first early access release and there's years of content updates to come. Hi, I'm Ray. I'm pretty new to making YouTube videos, so do consider hitting that subscribe button as we begin the road to 10k. Anyway, here are 4 things I want to see added to the game by the time we reach full release. This, by the way, won't cover things they've already discussed in their Discord, see my previous videos about that, or generic things that we already know are coming, like a bigger map or more leviathans. At number 1, we have more character progression. I want to see them continually expand on the biomod feature, which, based on the roadmap, is something they're already working on, but more specifically, I want to see them expand on the passive biomods that you unlock throughout scanning creatures. The system itself is super simple right now, but I for one was super excited when I got that upgraded scanner and realized there's actually a point to scanning things now outside of collecting lore. Whenever I played Subnautica 1, I always wanted to try and scan everything and collect every piece of information, even if a lot of the time I wouldn't actually want to read it all. This meant I was only really half-heartedly trying to scan things in the first game, which became problematic when it came to leviathans. On my first playthrough of Subnautica 1, I was deathly scared of the Reaper and Ghost, and still am honestly. Oh my god, was that a Reaper right next to me? It's definitely right behind me. Get away from me, get away from me, get away from me, get away from me, I don't care. Don't care, don't care, don't care, don't care. Stay away from me. Anyway, I couldn't bring myself to even go near them outside of a prawn suit or a cyclops. So the idea of going up to them to scan them just for a bit of lore was completely out of the question for me, and it ended up with me playing the game in a super passive way and completely avoiding the leviathans at all costs, as there was no gameplay benefit to scan them. Now, however, seeing the game basically say, you don't have to do this, but if you want that extra ability, well, that is exactly the motivation my brain loves to see. I grabbed that upgraded scanner and went straight for the collector, and had a memorable moment where I threw a flare, but he grabbed me anyway, and my whole screen started to turn dark with the flickers of purple that he does. But then I'm here thinking I'm dead when suddenly his aggression comes off me and his attention is finally redirected to the flare. Then I quickly finish off my scan and get the hell out of there. We 1000% need more of that to force scared thalassophobic players like myself to do what we would have regularly thought to be unthinkable. As a bonus to this, I'd also like to see more material progression as well, even if in reality it's just more busy work. I like the idea of having more stations in my base that process materials into more refined components that we then use for vehicles and upgrades and things like that. To me, it's a more satisfying gameplay progression, and it also adds a degree of additional realism since we're not just throwing raw materials onto something. At number 2, I want to see the world tree play a major role in the gameplay and story of the game. Of course, we know it's important, and the end of the early access story tells us just as much. But what I mean when I say this is I want to climb up the tree, kind of like when you would enter the Aurora in Subnautica 1 and discover all sorts of blueprints and lore. Maybe, in the case of the tree, we get remnants of the Macefield control humans and their settlements. Even cooler would be remnants of the architects and their structures, potentially if they ever did come to the planet. Or even remnants of the Axum and the Tailings, essentially making this location a melting pot of the different species and their tools and structures and lore. Personally, I would also love if there was some sort of living humanoid NPCs, like the species I just mentioned. However, I do recognize a lot of the charm and fear in Subnautica is the idea of being alone in a hostile world, though since there is multiplayer, maybe the idea isn't too far-fetched, especially since we had Marguerite in Below Zero. With that being said, Below Zero was quite a divisive game, so maybe that's not the best example to use, but I personally would love to see that return. I also want a major event to occur in relation to the world tree. Maybe it moves, or it gets partially, or maybe even completely destroyed, leading us to having to help resurrect it. Or maybe it blooms and does a loud call that can be heard throughout the planet, attracting creatures towards it, both from the sheer volume of its sound that it emits, or through the Macefield controlling things to approach it. Basically, once again, something like the Aurora exploding, but specifically to this Titan-class world tree creature. And something that it really reminds me of is the Gargantuan Leviathan in the Return of the Ancients mod on Subnautica 1. Where the Gargantuan Leviathan would suddenly appear and eat the sunbeam. Just imagine if whatever the world tree does awakens or unleashes a Gargantuan-esque Leviathan into the world. Speaking of the Gargantuan Leviathan, at number 3, I want to see something super massive, whether it's dead or alive. A creature from the depths, unlike anything we've seen before. Hundreds of meters long that could swallow a life pod in one bite. Again, it doesn't need to be alive. Part of me actually hopes it won't be, just to save myself from a heart attack. But the idea that just such a creature could have existed out in the void, or used to exist in the world, would already be enough. Just look at what the community did with the Gargantuan Leviathan. Modders will add their own interpretation of the creature to the game, no doubt. Storytellers and dreamers will think of all sorts of scenarios. Plus, the idea that something like that could be in the ocean, even if it quite literally isn't in the game files, as a living creature, would play into the psyche of myself, and probably a lot of other players, and make the game even scarier, just by making us overwork our imaginations. If it is alive though, I honestly hope it's stuck in a specific area with limited mobility, kind of like the Leviathan in Below Zero in the ice, but that it's alive and can move around inside of whatever it's stuck in. Because as a supermassive creature that dwarfs everything else in the game, it would kind of steal some of the fear of all the other Leviathans, which would be much smaller in comparison. And after the first few times you die to it, the mystery and consequently the fear related to it would be significantly diminished. So maybe just something like it's stuck under a root from the tree, I can only swish its head from side to side, or there's a huge alien containment facility that we can't actually enter, only observe, and we see it swimming around. Bonus points by the way if they do still make it aggressive, so that players that clip into its holding area get a very shocking surprise when it eats them. Ray from the future here. When I recorded this video, I hadn't actually seen anything about the leaked elusive Leviathan, which, by the name alone, seems like it could fit most of the criteria I've envisioned. It's significantly larger than any living creature we've seen before, other than technically the World Tree, and it might not actually be aggressive, or at least it would be very hard to encounter in the game world just given its name, elusive. We'll have to wait and see with that though. Anyway, on to number 4. Finally, at number 4 we have dynamic creature spawns and large map roaming. This is one thing I've wanted the most since I finished Subnautica 1 all those years ago. The map in this game, I presume, will have a lot more open ocean spaces. That is, if it's anything like the early access release we've had so far. But no doubt there will be underground sections as well, so I hope there are really large caves, or at least there's a mixture of narrow tunnels and giant open areas. Since we have a cheap and easy tool to distract Leviathans via the flares, having roaming or patrolling Leviathans wouldn't be too big of a hassle compared to the first game, where, assuming you're not stunning and killing the Leviathans, any area where one spawned pretty much became a no-go zone, or at least a zone you'd very quickly enter and then leave. For example, if we had some sort of upgraded flares that last longer and attract creatures from further away, we could distract a roaming Leviathan and easily escape, or fire flares and distract a Leviathan while we explore its patrolling area. These upgraded flares could be fired via the tadpole, kind of like the torpedoes in the first game, so that they're better balanced. Or maybe we just have some sort of tool that shoots out flares, and because they're being fired out of said tool, they get upgraded with magic alien technology. Anyway, this would add a constant fear factor to the game, which would always keep you on your toes no matter where you are. This does sort of seem to be the vibe they're trying to go for in this game, as it's loosely one of the reasons why they don't want us to be able to kill Leviathans, and why they're giving the Collect Leviathan, for example, much more sophisticated AI. That being said, however, it could get exhausting always being under threat from a Leviathan, especially near your base. So to combat this, there could be some sort of Axiom technology, or reverse engineering the maze field in some capacity, to keep specifically Leviathans that are tagged as roaming Leviathans at bay. I say roaming Leviathans specifically just so that we can't take this technology down to wherever the Lost River equivalent will be in this game and then make a permanently clear path from them. Then again, now that I say that out loud, maybe we would want that as a compromise to not being able to kill Leviathans and clear areas out. Or maybe you could just force them to no longer want to remain in a certain area, essentially freeing it up in the same way you would have done by killing it in the first game. Let me know what you guys think of these ideas. As usual, I'll be reading all the comments, so feel free to expand on any of these ideas or shoot them down if you hate them. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next one.